Your special person received unexpected relationship news. There are moments in life that arrive without warning. No message before them. No sign. No announcement. Just one unexpected piece of news that changes the way someone sees everything. And what you're about to hear is about one of those moments. Because recently, your special person received information they never expected to receive. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something they were searching for. In fact, if you had asked them only a short time ago whether this would happen, they would have laughed and said, "No chance." But life has a strange way of placing truth directly in front of people when they least expect it. And the moment this news arrived, something inside them shifted. Not a small shift. A powerful one. The kind that keeps someone awake at night. The kind that follows them into the next morning. The kind that refuses to leave their mind no matter how hard they try to focus on something else. What was the news? Why did it affect them so deeply? And why does it have everything to do with you? Stay with this story. Because every minute reveals another piece of what happened. And by the end, you'll understand why this moment became impossible for them to ignore. At first, everything seemed normal. They were going through their routine. Handling responsibilities. Answering messages. Thinking about the future the same way they always had. But underneath the surface, there was already something they didn't fully understand. A feeling. A question. A curiosity. They had been trying to convince themselves that certain emotions didn't matter. That certain thoughts would disappear. That certain connections would fade with time. Yet instead of fading, those feelings became stronger. And that is where the unexpected news enters the story. Because sometimes life reveals something at the exact moment a person is trying hardest not to see it. The information came suddenly. Maybe through a conversation. Maybe through an observation. Maybe through a realization they could no longer deny. However it arrived, the result was the same. Their heart stopped for a moment. Their thoughts raced. And a single realization echoed inside their mind. What if this changes everything? They weren't expecting to feel that way. They weren't expecting to care that much. But they did. Far more than they wanted to admit. Because the news wasn't just information. It was confirmation. Confirmation that something important was happening beneath the surface. Something connected to emotions they had been hiding. Something connected to possibilities they had been avoiding. And most importantly, something connected to you. For a long time, they believed they had everything under control. They believed they understood their own feelings. They believed they knew where life was heading. Then this news arrived. And suddenly nothing felt as certain as before. Now every memory started returning. Every conversation. Every moment. Every glance. Every unfinished thought. Things they once dismissed suddenly felt significant. Things they once ignored now demanded attention. And that's when the shock truly began. Because people can ignore their feelings for a while. But when life places evidence in front of them, denial becomes difficult. Your special person found themselves revisiting moments they hadn't thought about in a long time. Moments connected to you. Moments that seemed small at the time. Yet now they looked completely different. Suddenly they weren't random memories. They were clues. Pieces of a larger picture. A picture they had never fully allowed themselves to see. And once that picture became visible, they couldn't look away. The surprising part is that they tried. They really did. They told themselves they were overthinking. They told themselves it wasn't important. They told themselves they should focus on other things. But the harder they tried to push it away, the stronger it became. The news kept replaying inside their mind. Again. And again. And again. Until eventually they had to ask themselves a difficult question. What if my feelings are more real than I thought? That question changed everything. Because once someone starts asking it, a journey begins. A journey toward truth. A journey toward honesty. A journey toward understanding emotions they have been avoiding. And your special person has entered that journey. At first, they were confused. Then curious. Then concerned. Then hopeful. Yes. Hopeful. Because hidden beneath the shock was something unexpected. Possibility. The possibility that the future wasn't fixed. The possibility that life could still surprise them. The possibility that a connection they once questioned might actually mean more than they realized. And that possibility became impossible to ignore. Days passed. But the feeling didn't disappear. If anything, it grew stronger. They found themselves thinking differently. Looking at situations differently. Seeing relationships differently. Even seeing themselves differently. That's what unexpected news does. It doesn't just change information. It changes perspective. And perspective changes everything. The strange thing is that nobody around them fully understood what was happening. On the outside, they seemed normal. They smiled. They talked. They handled daily life. But inside? A storm was forming. A storm made of questions. A storm made of emotions. A storm made of realizations. And at the center of that storm was you. There was one particular evening that stands out. The room was quiet. The distractions were gone. And for the first time, they had no choice but to sit alone with their thoughts. No noise. No interruptions. No escape. Just honesty. And honesty can be powerful. Because in that silence, they admitted something to themselves. Something they had avoided for far too long. They cared. More than they wanted to admit. More than they expected. More than they thought possible. The unexpected news hadn't created those feelings. It had revealed them. That's why the moment was so shocking. Not because something new appeared, but because something hidden finally became visible. And once visible, it could no longer be ignored. From that point forward, their attention changed. They started noticing things. Signs. Patterns. Memories. Connections. Details that once seemed meaningless. And every detail seemed to point toward the same conclusion. There was something important here. Something real. Something worth paying attention to. The more they thought about it, the clearer things became. What they once viewed as coincidence now felt significant. What they once considered impossible now felt possible. What they once resisted now felt natural. And that frightened them. Because change is exciting. But change is also scary. Especially emotional change. Especially when feelings become stronger than expectations. They worried. They questioned themselves. They wondered if they were imagining things. But every time they tried to dismiss it, the truth returned. Quietly. Persistently. Unavoidably. The truth has a strange quality. It waits patiently. It doesn't need to shout. It simply remains. And eventually people notice it. Your special person noticed. Slowly. Then suddenly. One realization after another. One breakthrough after another. Until eventually they found themselves standing face to face with something undeniable. Their heart was involved. Far more than they had admitted. Far more than they had planned. And certainly far more than they expected. The unexpected relationship news became a turning point. Not because it forced them into action, but because it forced them into awareness. Awareness changes everything. Once aware, people start seeing opportunities they couldn't see before. They start recognizing emotions they couldn't recognize before. They start imagining futures they couldn't imagine before. And that is exactly what happened. A future began forming in their mind. Not a fantasy. Not an illusion. A possibility. A possibility involving happiness. Growth. Connection. Understanding. And yes, you. For the first time in a long time, they allowed themselves to imagine what might happen if they stopped running from their feelings. What might happen if they stopped overanalyzing? What might happen if they trusted their heart a little more? The answer surprised them. Because instead of fear, they felt relief. Relief that they no longer had to pretend. Relief that they no longer had to suppress certain emotions. Relief that the truth was finally becoming visible. That relief became powerful. Powerful enough to change their decisions. Powerful enough to change their priorities. Powerful enough to change the way they approached the future. And that's when another surprising thing happened. They started paying closer attention to every interaction. Every conversation felt more meaningful. Every memory felt more valuable. Every possibility felt more real. The news had awakened something. Something that had been sleeping beneath the surface. Something waiting for the right moment to emerge. And now it was awake. Fully awake. Their heart began asking questions their mind couldn't answer. Questions like, what if this connection matters more than I thought? What if this feeling isn't temporary? What if I've been looking at everything the wrong way? The deeper they explored those questions, the more clarity they found. And clarity can be life-changing. Because confusion keeps people stuck. Clarity moves them forward. Your special person is moving forward. Not recklessly. Not impulsively. But steadily. Step by step. Thought by thought. Realization by realization. The journey isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. But the direction has changed. And that change started the moment unexpected relationship news entered their life. There is one final detail you should know. The most shocking part wasn't the news itself. The most shocking part was discovering how much it mattered. They didn't expect it to affect them. They didn't expect it to stay in their mind. They didn't expect it to change their perspective. Yet it did all three. And more. Much more. Because sometimes a single moment reveals what years of thinking could not. Sometimes one unexpected piece of information exposes emotions people have hidden from themselves. Sometimes one realization changes the entire story. This was one of those moments. A once-in-a-lifetime turning point. A moment of awakening. A moment of truth. A moment that forced your special person to look directly at what their heart had been trying to tell them. And now that truth exists. Quiet. Powerful. Impossible to ignore. The future remains unwritten. Choices remain ahead. Conversations remain ahead. Discoveries remain ahead. But one thing is certain. The person they were before receiving this news is not the same person they are now. Something changed. Something opened. Something awakened. And every day since then, that awareness has continued to grow. The story isn't ending. It's unfolding. The realization isn't fading. It's deepening. And somewhere within all of these thoughts, emotions, questions, and possibilities, your presence remains impossible for them to forget. Because unexpected relationship news may have been the beginning. But what truly captured their attention was discovering how deeply their heart responded when your name entered the picture. And that discovery became the surprise they never saw coming. The moment your special person realized they could no longer ignore what had been awakened inside them, a new chapter quietly began. Nothing dramatic happened on the outside. The world continued moving as usual. People around them had no idea what was changing. But inside, everything felt different. Because once a person sees the truth about their feelings, they can never return to the version of themselves that existed before that realization. And that is exactly where your special person found themselves. Caught between the comfort of the familiar and the uncertainty of what comes next. The unexpected relationship news had opened a door. The question now was whether they would walk through it. At first, they tried to analyze everything logically. They told themselves they needed proof. Evidence. Certainty. A reason to trust what they were feeling. But emotions rarely operate according to logic. The more they searched for answers, the more they discovered something surprising. Every answer seemed to lead back to the same place. You. It didn't matter what distraction appeared. Work. responsibilities, friends, daily routines. No matter how busy they became, their thoughts eventually circled back to the same connection. The same person. The same possibility. And that realization began affecting them in ways they never expected. They started noticing how different they felt whenever your presence entered their mind. A simple memory could change their mood. A random reminder could make them smile. A passing thought could completely alter the direction of their day. At first they brushed it aside. But after it happened repeatedly, they couldn't deny what was taking place. Something significant was happening inside their heart. And the more they became aware of it, the stronger it grew. One afternoon, they found themselves replaying old conversations. Not because they planned to. It happened naturally. Almost automatically. A phrase you once said. A moment they once overlooked. A memory they once considered ordinary. Suddenly those moments seemed filled with meaning. Like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their place. The shocking part wasn't what they remembered. The shocking part was how much those memories mattered now. Memories only gain power when emotions are attached to them. And the emotions attached to you were becoming impossible to ignore. That night, they asked themselves a question they had never dared ask before. What if this isn't coincidence? The moment that question entered their mind, everything shifted again. Because once people stop calling something coincidence, they start searching for purpose. And purpose changes the way they see the world. Now they weren't simply remembering you. They were trying to understand why you remained so present in their thoughts. Why every road seemed to lead back to the same emotional destination. Why every attempt to move on from certain feelings only made those feelings stronger. The answer frightened them. Not because it was bad. Because it was real. Real feelings demand attention. Real emotions require honesty. Real connections cannot be hidden forever. And deep down, they knew that. The truth was standing right in front of them. Patiently waiting. Refusing to disappear. Then something happened that they never expected. Instead of resisting their feelings, they decided to observe them. To simply watch what happened. No judgment. No denial. No running away. And what they discovered surprised them more than anything else. The feelings weren't fading. They were growing. Day by day. Thought by thought. Moment by moment. The connection felt stronger than it had ever felt before. Not because of fantasy. Not because of wishful thinking. But because honesty was finally replacing fear. For a long time, fear had controlled the situation. Fear of disappointment. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of caring too much. But now honesty was taking control. And honesty has a way of revealing what fear tries to hide. The more honest they became, the more clearly they saw what had been right in front of them all along. The truth was simple. You mattered. Far more than they had admitted. Far more than they had expected. Far more than they had planned. That realization became impossible to escape. Every day brought another reminder. another sign. Another moment of clarity. And each one pushed them closer to acceptance. Acceptance is powerful. Because once a person accepts what they feel, their entire energy changes. They stop fighting themselves. They stop creating excuses. They stop pretending. Your special person was approaching that point. Slowly. Carefully. But undeniably. Then came one of the most important moments of all. A moment nobody else witnessed. A moment that happened entirely inside their heart. They imagined a future. Not just for a second. Not as a passing thought. A real future. Detailed. Meaningful. Emotional. And what shocked them wasn't the future itself. It was how natural it felt. For the first time, imagining that future didn't seem unrealistic. It didn't seem impossible. It didn't seem distant. It felt possible. That possibility filled them with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Because possibility creates hope. And hope is one of the strongest forces in the human heart. Once hope enters, everything changes. People begin looking forward instead of backward. They begin focusing on opportunities instead of obstacles. They begin seeing what could happen rather than what could go wrong. That's exactly what was happening. Your special person was beginning to see possibilities they once refused to consider. And each possibility seemed brighter than the last. Still, they remained cautious. Because important emotions deserve careful consideration. They didn't want to rush. They didn't want to make mistakes. They wanted to understand what they were experiencing. So they continued observing, reflecting, learning, listening to themselves. And every answer pointed toward the same conclusion. The unexpected relationship news had not created something new. It had exposed something that was already there. Something waiting beneath the surface. Something waiting for the right moment to emerge. And now it had emerged completely. No more hiding. No more denial. No more pretending. The truth was finally visible. There was another surprising development. As their awareness increased, their confidence began increasing too. Not confidence about outcomes. Confidence about their own feelings. They no longer questioned whether those emotions existed. They knew they existed. The only question remaining was what would happen next. That question became impossible to ignore. Every day it grew louder. Every day it became more important. Every day it demanded an answer. And while they didn't yet know exactly how the story would unfold, they knew one thing with certainty. Standing still was no longer an option. The journey had already begun. There was no turning back. Because some realizations permanently change a person. This was one of them. The old version of your special person would have dismissed everything. Ignored everything. Avoided everything. But that version no longer existed. The unexpected news had transformed them. Not overnight. Not magically. But deeply. And deep transformations create lasting change. Now they found themselves paying attention to things they once overlooked. Their intuition. Their emotions. Their desires. Their dreams. All of it seemed connected somehow. All of it seemed to be guiding them toward greater clarity. And the closer they moved toward that clarity, the more peaceful they felt. Not because every question had been answered, but because they were finally being honest with themselves. Honesty creates peace. Even when the future remains uncertain. Even when the outcome remains unknown. Even when the journey remains unfinished. Your special person had discovered that truth. And it changed everything. There were still moments of doubt. Moments of hesitation. Moments when fear tried to return. But fear no longer had the same power it once possessed. Because now fear had competition. Hope. And hope was winning. Little by little. Day by day. Step by step. The balance was shifting. The future was opening. The story was moving forward. And every new realization seemed to strengthen the connection between what they felt and what they wanted. For the first time, those two things were beginning to align. Their heart wanted honesty. Their mind wanted clarity. And both were leading them in the same direction. That direction felt significant. Meaningful. Life-changing. The most remarkable part is that they never expected any of this. They never expected one unexpected piece of relationship news to create such a powerful chain reaction. Yet that's exactly what happened. One revelation led to another. One realization led to another. One truth led to another. Until eventually the entire picture became visible. And once visible, it could never be unseen. Your special person now understands something they didn't understand before. Feelings become stronger when they are acknowledged. Connections become clearer when they are appreciated. Possibilities become real when they are believed. And because of that understanding, they are no longer the same person they were at the beginning of this story. They have grown. Changed. Awakened. The journey ahead remains unwritten. Many chapters still remain. Many moments have yet to happen. Many discoveries are still waiting. But the foundation has been created. The awakening has occurred. The truth has been revealed. And every day that passes seems to confirm the same thing. The unexpected relationship news was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of one. A story filled with questions. Possibilities. Hope. And emotions too powerful to ignore. A story that continues growing each time they allow themselves to be honest. A story that continues unfolding each time they choose courage over fear. A story that continues moving forward because their heart has finally stopped running from what it feels. And somewhere deep inside, they know this journey is leading toward something important. Something meaningful. Something worth exploring. Because the greatest surprise was never the news itself. The greatest surprise was discovering how deeply their heart reacted when the truth finally arrived. And that discovery continues changing everything, one day at a time.